Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am excited to invite back Toby Tabak. You're actually one of the few people that I'm having on the podcast a second time because I felt like there was so much information that we just did not get to cover. So, welcome, Toby.
Thank you for having me back. It's an honor and a privilege, really, Dvora. Truly.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Toby had our initial conversation was about the experience of being in the NICU and what parents go through, and a little bit about what the babies go through as well. And where I'd like this conversation to pick up is about more about the experience of what happens after you go home from the NICU. But before we do that, for somebody who maybe hasn't heard the earlier podcast together, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to the conversation today.
Hi. Okay, sure. It's my name is Toby Tabak, and I wear a few hats. One of them is I'm one of the program directors of Yad Rachel, which is an organization which helps women with perinatal mood disorders. I'm a mother of five, the youngest of which is 11 and was born as a micro preemie, 23 weeker, which is really one of just the first week of viability. Now they're saying 22, but really, um, practically, it's the first week of viability. And as a result of my experience and also of my knowledge of running a non-for-profit, we started an organization called WeeCare Preemies, which offers support and guidance for families of preemies and micro preemies.
Amazing. And WeCare is based primarily out of Lakewood, but you're obviously serving people from around the globe.
We're not primarily based out of Lakewood, actually. No,
Okay. Where are you primarily
we're
located?
primarily located in the tri-state area, but we do
Okay.
offer support worldwide, literally. We've
Yeah.
helped families in Dubai, we've helped families in Israel,
No
etc.,
kidding.
etc. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So let's pick up from the point where, I think one of the things that I know about perinatal mood disorders is that one of the high risk moments is when somebody comes home from the NICU,
Yeah.
because it's that space of like, I held it together, I held it together, I held it together. And then I came home and everybody expects me to be celebrating and I'm so excited. And thank God the baby's home from the hospital, right? I'd love for you to start with your own story of when your son came home from the hospital. How many weeks of gestational age, or I guess, how would you describe it? Like birth age or gestational age? How old was he when he finally was released from the hospital? And what do you remember about that time?
Okay. I think this is such an important conversation because initially, when we started We Care, our focus was so much about the NICU period. And it's interesting to see that large majority of our support has shifted to post NICU. So I think that what the people that are listening, your audience, I think would find this validating and informative, whether they themselves are going through it or whether someone that they know is going through it. So, for an example, my son Shlomi came home 3.5 months after he was born, and it actually was very close to his due date. Not on it, but very, very, very close, a little bit past it. And I could speak from my experience. You want me to speak specifically from my experience, and then I'll
Let's
share with
start there.
you. Yeah, I'll
Hmm.
share with you what I hear feedback from the hundreds of women that we've spoken to through WeCare. I was very, very anxious. I don't think there's a right or wrong way on how to feel when your NICU baby is coming home. Okay. So I was extremely anxious. I didn't I didn't have the level of attachment that I had to my other children. Like I try to explain to people that I nursed my other babies until they were two. So they were walking and talking by the time they weaned. So you could understand how connected we were. And there was this baby that I felt connected to, but I didn't feel attached to. It also, so there was a lot of like anxiety about that and fear and almost a new feeling. Maybe you have some sort of clinical term to it, a weariness almost about like this child in this relationship. He wasn't familiar to me because I wasn't there 24/7. I wasn't bathing him. I wasn't changing his diaper. I was observing other professionals and medical professionals taking care of him. So there was a detachment, a weariness, a fear. He was also a medical baby. Like I looked at him as someone who was just attached to wires his whole life. How can I be trusted to take care of him? I didn't trust myself. There was a tremendous amount of anxiety, a huge amount of anxiety. The bigger piece of anxiety was that he came home during flu season, and there is so much talk and fear mongering. It's not even fear mongering, it's fear mongering, and there's also reality of bringing a baby that vulnerable home with that much of a compromised immune system.
Hmm.
And so all of this was just sitting on me. And I was extremely, extremely anxious about bringing him home. And you'd hear from a lot of mothers that many of them were just so thrilled and grateful to bring their baby home. So, on top of all of that, I was feeling guilt and shame that I was feeling this way.
Hmm.
So, there was a lot of these very heavy feelings. And coming off almost 4 months, because I was on bed rest prior to him being born, of just being physically and emotionally depleted, plus a traumatic birth, you can
Right.
imagine how much of a mess. So I was not a pretty sight when this baby came home. This whole beatific image of bringing my baby home finally and everything, we lived happily ever after. It was quite challenging for me. I stayed up the night before he came home, and they don't tell you beforehand, oh, in a week. It's literally in
Right.
24 hours. And I stayed up the whole night till 2, 3 in the morning, scrubbing my house with Purell and Clorox wipes, and just crying and anxious and crying and calling up the NICU nurse. How am I going to manage? What's going to
Mm.
be? And just having panic attack, not panic, panic attack after panic attack. Just, there was a tiny part of me that was happy that the whole madness was coming to an end. But majority of what I was feeling was a lot of anxiety. And I love saying that because I do believe that there are some mothers that are afraid to express that.
Hmm.
Maybe to
Hmm.
you in private, in your private, space, but they're afraid to admit that. And so when I share this with a lot of the other preemie moms and I talk about this, and it's such a huge piece for me, we have something called transitioning home package that we send to the mother when we find out the baby comes home. So we send a cute little gift for the baby, and then we send a cute little gift for the mom. But most importantly was, I wish I had it here, but a beautiful poem and a beautiful note that I wrote, and we put it on a beautiful piece of stationery, just congratulating them for the courageous task that they just accomplished and finished, and also telling them that there's no right or wrong way how to feel during this period coming home, and to expect a bunch of different conflicting emotions and feelings, and we're here if you want to talk. And there's so many of them that reach out saying, this is exactly what I had to hear. And included in that, we do have a recording where we had a licensed social worker give a lecture on what to do when these feelings come up. And which leads us to the next step, which is coming home, settling the baby in. And then for me, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people, all of a sudden it's like, what just happened?
Right. Right. Right.
That
Well,
adrenaline of the that gets you through a crisis,
right. Right.
beautiful coping mechanism that gets you through a crisis. All of a sudden, you're home, things are quiet, things are still, and it's like,
What
what
just
just
happened to
happened?
me? Yeah, yeah. Can I ask you a question? Did anybody prepare you at your time? Did anybody say to you, let's talk a little bit about the conflicted feelings that you may be feeling,
No,
or nothing?
absolutely not.
Nobody ever mentions it. Yeah.
No,
Hmm.
no, there was
Do you
none
think
of
things
that.
have changed now? I mean, you're not that many years out. He's 11, but
Yes, I think
do you
we're
feel
making
things
the
have changed?
change right now.
Yeah,
Right now, we're
yeah.
making the change, and I think WeeCare has made the change, and we're constantly sharing and discussing it, and there's a lot of awareness that we're doing. And I've seen it being mentioned on other websites and podcasts. So I think that, and especially in our culture, the Baruch Hashem culture,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yep.
is
The thank God culture.
thank God
Hmm.
culture. This is a
Hmm.
miracle baby. Thank God he's home. You should be just dancing in the streets, singing his praises. So being able to tell others what wasn't told to me is that your body and your mind and your soul and your neshama could hold space for a number of
Hmm.
different feelings.
Hmm.
One doesn't contradict another, and it's
Right.
okay for you to be grateful, and it's also okay for you to be scared. It's okay for you to be traumatized. It's okay for you to be thankful. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're able to hold all of that.
And I just think it's so powerful to recognize that sometimes the people that are focused on the care of the baby, which is their job, right? And in some NICUs, I think there's an emphasis on supporting the moms.
Mhm.
I actually just heard about an organization called the NICU Translator, which was like to be almost like a NICU doula to parents that are navigating NICU, which I imagine is attempting to also support the parents going through this process. But all the people are focused on is the medical stability of that baby, the readiness for that baby to come home without the like, oh, by the way, there's the person who's caring for them. Like, what does readiness look like for you? Right. When I hear that, I hear you talking about like, I'm scared, right? I'm frightened as well. Right. Can we talk a little bit about the fear of bringing the baby home?
Sure. So yeah, I could go on forever about that. And then there's the whole other piece of heading. You tell me what you want to address first, because part of the fear was, again, I was 40 years old when I had him. So I was a seasoned mom, and I was fully aware of, the delays and the other issues that come up, which we could talk about in a minute. So there was fear about that too, fear of the future. What's going to be with this baby? You know, so many of us, it's all about in the NICU, just this baby has to survive. This
Mm-hmm.
baby has to be medically sound, you know, and so we're dealing with so many medical crises that come up, surgeries, complications, and things like that. So it's all about getting this child to function, to breathe, to you know, diapers and all that, respiration. And then there's no talk about, yes, these babies are surviving, and yes, we're able, as a result of medicine and science and miracles, these babies are coming home and they're surviving, but with collateral damage to the fact that they were born so early. So because I was
Mm-hmm.
already older and more mature and more uh, practical, I was like, oh my God, what's going to
Mm-hmm.
be? What's going to
Can I
be?
just think before I get into the other part of the question, for those that are not really familiar with understanding the implications of being a micro preemie are, what are some of the likely outcomes that you were told or that you understood about having a baby that lives for 3.5 months in a NICU that was born very early? What is some of that collateral damage?
Yeah. So on the most basic level and the most basic level is developmental delays, just basic milestones. So
Hmm.
it's understood that the baby is behind, right, in gross motor skills, fine motor skills, talking. So in a best case scenario, a preemie or a micro preemie would be that many months adjusted, right, from when they were supposed to be born. So that would mean typical OT, PT, speech, language. Many of them struggle with eating, food aversions. And then I could go into the whole gamut of the more extreme implications of those who are medical, those who have issues. A lot of them are coming home with feeding tubes. A lot of them are coming home with NG tubes. A lot of them had brain bleeds. A lot of them have eye issues, gastro issues. Then there's the neurodevelopmental stuff, which it's very common for them to. There's a connection between prematurity and autism.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
understand?
Sure.
Then there are, like, for instance, my child had severe sensory issues, still does. Still,
Hmm.
that their whole nervous system gets completely dysregulated.
Right.
And talk about their physical, you know, they were supposed to be like, for, I want you to envision God's amazing, perfect way in you know, when a child is conceived to when they're born, everything has a system and a process. When a baby is sitting crunched up and moving around and pushing against the mother's abdomen and against the mother's belly, they're strengthening their core.
Mm.
And there's all sorts of gravity things that are happening then. If the baby's taken out and is spread eagle like this for months and months and months, never mind the noise, the flashing, I'm talking just about their core, how weak their core could be. And just, there's just so much damage. Now, a lot of it is just delays, and a lot of it could be rectified. If there's any mothers listening in, we have come so far with therapies and with different things, and majority of these babies catch up. But then there are many that are struggle with things that are lifelong, or at least through their
Hmm.
childhood. So
Right.
imagine you as a practitioner looking at a mother who had uh, this trauma and this shock and this physical trauma that happened in their postpartum period. Then for
Hmm.
4 or 5 months, she's stuck in the hospital and there's repeated crises, one after another after another. Then she comes home. Then there's that whole transition period of getting to know this baby and acclimating, and then getting the rest of the family dynamics, which we could talk about in a second.
I'd
All
love
of a
to.
sudden,
Hmm.
like, hi, there's a new sibling in the house and mommy's attention is not on. And then not even have time to catch your breath or process, because now we're going into the next stage of getting Humpty Dumpty put back together again.
And Humpty Dumpty can be not just the baby, but also the entire family system and structure and relationships and everything
That's for
included in
sure.
that.
But
Hmm.
the endless appointments, and those are typical
Hmm.
appointments. It's typical in a best case scenario, typical appointments,
Right.
and God forbid in a worst case scenario, just surgeries. And then we have what we had this year, which was horrific. You have a bad flu season or a bad virus
Right.
season we
Right.
had this
RSV.
year,
Hmm.
and RSV, and the chances of being re-hospitalized are very high.
Yeah.
Is
Okay,
your
take me back to the conversation about the other aspect of the fear, right? So the fear is for the future, but talk
Mhm.
a little bit about like that immediate fear of coming home. What's the thing that's most on your mind when you're transitioning that baby home? It seems to me like a big part of it is like just keep the baby alive, right? That fear of I don't have nurses around me, I don't have
Yeah,
the emergency button, I don't have the people who are like, you're doing a great job. Like you're
yeah.
all in, all alone.
You're all in, you're all alone, you're super responsible. You don't have a relationship with this baby. I know there's this
Mm,
magical intuition that a mother does have. So there's the fear of like, do I know this child? Do I know his schedule? So there's this huge adjustment of getting to know them. The fear of is he going to be healthy? Yeah, you just said it. It's just your fear. And then there's this other piece, which we here, is also trying to shift. All that help and support dies down.
hmm. Right.
You were in the hospital, so you were in crisis,
Yeah.
and then it's over. And what I'm begging and imploring anyone who's listening is the only one who could change that is you. You have to ask for help. You have to reach out and say, I'm a Kimpataran, which is translation. I'm a, how do you say Kimpataran?
I guess a newly delivered mom.
This is no different. As a matter of fact, I'm in better. Yeah, I slept a couple of nights in the past few months, but barely. But I'm in worse shape than a typical mother who just brought home an 8 pounder. And it's being up for feedings during the night. And a lot of these babies are very sleepy, very tired. They don't like to eat. So you're basically a brand new baby mom, but the world around you is like, oh, the baby's 5 months old. She's fine. Oh, I'm just so happy. And they're not being indifferent. They're not
Right.
being indifferent and they're not being callous. They're just like, oh, she's great. She rested for 3 months. She's fine. She's so happy. She's over the moon. And
Right.
so all that outside help, like,
Fizzles away.
and people's
Hmm.
attention span are pretty short anyway. So
Hmm. Right.
so you're
Right.
very, very, very much alone, and everyone's in that thank God bubble of, oh, thank God the baby's home. And so I'll hear from moms about the resentment. Nobody was there to support me, and I'm like, well, you have to speak up and you have to
Yeah.
let them know. So I think for me also, my thing was that I didn't want to be a burden anymore for anyone.
Right.
Like I felt like I depended on so many people for such a long time. I can't keep on doing this. I just can't.
Hmm.
I have to
Hmm.
like just it's just not fear because of course I'm always thinking about everybody else before I think of me.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about what you remember about bringing him home, that reintegration to the family system, and then we'll talk about husbands. But what is it like to bring him home and the family system kind of shifting and changing very rapidly? One thing I think we need to acknowledge is that you also were spending many days away from
Yes.
home,
Yes.
right? If you were lucky enough to have a baby in a NICU nearby, yes, you have more flexibility of running back and forth. We have many babies that are coming into Philadelphia from Lakewood, anywhere else as well, especially if they knew the baby was not going to be well. So we have parents that live in other cities and then their newborn is in CHOP, right? Or is in
Yeah.
Philly. And
Yeah.
so that like requirement of going back and forth with also with the understanding that we know that babies get better care when they're attended to, right? When there's family members at bedside. There's studies that show that those babies not only do they do better, but they actually get better medical care when they're like, oh, this
Sure.
this baby has a family member at bedside all the time. But that pressure being torn from other children at home to child in the hospital. So just the exhaustion of going back and forth and also the absence to the other children at home. Yes, they understand why, but I still want my mommy. I still want somebody who's doing homework with me, who's helping me, who's cooking my dinner, right?
It's
What
huge.
was
And
it
we
like?
we spoke about that last time, how horrific that was and how hard it was. And the
Hmm.
different tips and tools that we do is, just to create some sort of schedule of consistency and routine. So thank God that piece, when the baby comes home, that shifts dramatically because really all the other kids want is they want mommy at home. That's it.
Hmm.
That's it.
Hmm.
They don't care about anything else. They just want mommy at home. And of course, that's much easier. The running and the running and the chaos and the running and the scheduling, that changes. And that's a huge relief. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even realize until that was over, like, oh my gosh, it was funny. It was an adjustment because it was almost like it became like so normal that all of a sudden it's like, okay. But the children were thrilled that the baby came home and the children were thrilled to have him around. You have to understand they were not allowed to visit him. And they've only
Mm.
gotten stricter since COVID.
Really?
And yeah, and so they were really not allowed to visit him. He had to be above a certain age. Once flu season happens, the NICU gets closed down. A total full respect for that. There's no reason why all these foreign germs should be there. So that was the beautiful part. Like really, I don't want to make this all morose and depressing. Let's talk about the beautiful parts of it. So your life calms down considerably. Routine sets in, a new routine. The driving, the expense of the driving, the hassle of the driving, that's over. And mommy is present, and this baby that they davened for, that they prayed for, and they've been talking about is finally there. So that is, of course, blissful. That's the only way to
Hmm.
describe it. That's a
Hmm.
beautiful gift, and there's nothing better for the baby to be home and to sort of get healed by being held and being sung to and being carried and being away from all the noise and the beeping. There's a young couple that helping out recently had twins, and they're bringing the babies home, and all they're busy with is what are the appointments and what's going to be with therapy and what's going to be with therapy, and I want to make sure the babies are getting fit. And I spoke, they're very young couples, so I spoke to the grandparents and I spoke to the parents as well, and I said the biggest therapy for this baby right now is healing with the family love, and for you guys to get to know them, it's twins,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
bond with them and
Hmm.
just breathe together for the first time. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very, very nice. The children are always so excited. Of course, the younger toddlers, I didn't have little ones, but I hear from yeah, they react in the typical way when a foreign body is brought into a house.
For sure, for
So
sure.
that's just the whole parenting piece. But for that, that is just that, when you see that happening, that brings a lot of calm. And it's like, oh my God, we're a family. Oh my
Yeah.
God, this, we're going to be okay. We're going to be
Hmm.
okay. We're all going to be okay. This is how God meant it to be. This is normal now,
Hmm. Can I ask something? Did you feel like, it's very interesting when you say we're going to be okay, this is going to be okay. I always have a hard time with that, maybe because as a trauma therapist, like I hear all the bad stuff and everybody's bad outcomes, right? Like I wonder if that was hard for you to say with the knowledge that I might have more hospitalizations, like the baby might get the flu. Like, was that always on your mind, or you really were able to focus in on
No,
we're going
no,
to
I
be
had
okay?
little times. Well, first of all, I'm very lucky, and we could talk about the marriage dynamic. My husband's perpetually positive, so
Hmm.
he's just blessed with that personality. I'm more the
Okay.
negative Nancy, so I'm always worst case scenario. I'm always like
Got it.
10 years down the line, what's going to be, what's going to be, what's going to be.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he's always like, but today is good.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
thank God I had him pulling me back into the present. Um, but what was the question again? I just got off tangent for a
In terms
minute.
of you get no, if in terms of how are you
But
able
those
to
little
stay
tiny
in that
moments
space?
of
Right.
right, those little tiny moments of sitting on a couch with a baby and the kids singing to it for the first time, that was like, whoa, that was very, very healing. Okay, this is good, this is normal, this is okay. But, and I'm very open about this, I've shared this many times with the WeeCare moms, we have many support groups. I totally went off a deep end. Like I went off, I hate to use that term, but
Yeah,
I
let's clarify that. I think it's important to
yeah,
quantify
I
it.
really, really did not do well. I think,
Okay.
again, I went into that mommy beer mode and that okay mode for the first couple of months. Once the pediatrician told me he was healthy enough and strong enough to start, it was obvious that he was floppy. He had low muscle tone, all the normal stuff that's to be expected. Let's get him some, he had a heart surgery. We waited for that to be over.
Mm.
And then we started with the therapies, the OT, the PT, the stuff like that. And then something else, like I just realized, thank God for my husband, he realized that I was becoming like almost obsessive compulsive about his health and about his
Mm.
progress. His health
Mm.
and about his progress. His health and progress. And let me explain to the audience obsessive compulsive, like I would wake up in the middle of the night with fears and thoughts over and over again. Does he have fever? Is he okay? Is he sick? Is he breathing all right? What's going to be? What's going to be? What's going to be? What's going to
Hmm.
be?
Hmm.
And I got just stuck in that cycle and I couldn't get out of it. And just there was one day where my husband just sat me, and I was crying a lot and worried and I was frantic and I was obsessively booking appointments by therapists and trying to get the best and the top and rationalizing it that, this is what I got to do for my child. And just like, I didn't realize I was falling apart until my husband sat me down and said, Toby, you're not okay. This is not okay. This is really, really not okay. You're not okay. You need to talk to someone.
Hmm. So I want to qualify or quantify that idea of like I fell apart, right?
Yeah.
because I think that it's when we name something, we have the power to claim it and then treat it properly, right? It sounds to me, I'm not getting diagnosed, but it sounds to me like you struggled with postpartum, maybe depression, maybe anxiety, maybe OCD, but ultimately you had and you developed a perinatal mood disorder, which
Yes.
is incredibly common after a process of a NICU parenting, right? It's a risk factor for it's one of those significant risk factors because of everything we've talked about. And I think there's such a pressure to like have it all together, got to keep it all together, that the unraveling piece of it is often almost missed because like, but you kept it all together for 3 months, right? And probably had some subclinical presentation as you
Sure.
described, right? Of like coming home and having panic attacks and
Right.
having, cleaning and over cleaning the household, trying to keep that baby safe. There's so many reasons that are like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
And also, it's critical for us to say, even if it makes sense, it's distressing. It needs care and treatment. And your husband was able to be like, you're not okay.
Right.
Someone
And
would be
and
like,
I
what?
said, and
Yeah,
it's funny that Toby Tabak from Yad Rachel didn't notice it because
you
like I
can't.
said
Right.
so well. I rationalized a lot of the behavior, like I'm being a responsible mother, and this is what he told
Absolutely.
me that I need to do. And but the minute he said that, like I'm like, okay, you're right, you know.
Right.
So my and again, it was a great. And what's great is I'm pretty much, what they call in AA the functioning alcoholic.
Hmm.
So, and this is important from me out of health perspective. Like I didn't look like I was falling apart, and I was doing great, and I was juggling everything because this is what I do. I do best,
Right.
right?
Right.
And just and I so there was a lot of that messages of Toby, you're doing amazing. It's unbelievable what you're doing for this baby, and it's unbelievable what you did. So to finally give myself that permission to say like, no, this is not okay. You need to go talk to someone. It took some time. You know,
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I hear you describing that fear, right? It's that can be almost clinical level, even if it's rational. That
right?
fear of bringing that
Right.
baby home. There's so much responsibility. Like your job is to keep that baby alive and well and healthy and whatever trajectory they need towards, maturing and growing into a healthy little one and a healthy adult.
Mhm.
It's a lot of responsibility. So thank you for the honesty of it. I think it's
Absolutely.
critical to hear it. Yeah.
It's huge. And every time that I speak to the preemie mothers, and there's a lot of talk about this, I discuss this a lot and I bring it, it's almost like me making amends to myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
just telling everybody that don't do this alone and don't try to recover alone and don't try to heal alone. And, you're, you need to, we need to be able, it's just no matter how cliche it sounds, but in order to nurture you, we have to nurture ourselves.
Sure.
And as much as I kept on saying, oh, I'm being the perfect mom, I really wasn't. Because one of the ways that, and you know this from all the work that you do, but specifically with a preemie, the best thing I could do for that baby was to be mindful, calm, and relaxed,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
So much
And
easier
I
said than done.
convinced myself that I was doing my best for my baby by being like over responsible and obsessive, and because that's I'm just being such a good mom,
Yeah.
but really being present, mindful, and relaxed. And this conversation comes up, and I think it's important for preemie moms to hear, because we're so good, and we're so vigilant, and we're so diligent that comes up later on with the conversation of how much therapy for these children. I don't know if now is the time to talk about it, because then we get into the next stage of super mom, of like, I got to fix this broken child. I got to fix him. I got to make him walk. So there's 16 different modalities that I can choose, and there's 5 different specialists all around the world, and
Mm.
all that
Mm.
chatter and all the mom blogs and the mom
Yeah.
chat, all that. And I've had a number of professionals come on, paraprofessionals and professionals related to the post NICU world, like PTs and OTs and things like that, language specialists, and all of them, their main message is rather less therapy and a more calm mother and a calm home. You're doing
Wow.
more for the child.
Good.
You're
Hmm.
doing much more for that child, for his development. If you're not, I'm not talking about being negligent,
No, of course not.
for his development, if this is too much for you, then it's too much for him.
Let's come back to it because I do want to. Maybe it's a good thing to end with, but I
Yeah,
I want to come back to that because I think that again that pressure of the supermom is almost like
yeah,
this next identity that you have no choice but to assume. Could we talk about your husband or about men in general? You don't have to
sure.
speak about him. Unfortunately, he was not available for this podcast interview, but I want to talk a bit about what you have come to learn about men in their partnership. We're talking about heterosexual coupling here. What do you know about men in what you're hearing about their ability to show up, to support, to what about their own fear and wariness of a relationship with this baby? Like, what are the themes that you're hearing in terms of the men? And then let's talk about the men and the relationship with their wives.
You know what? I'm so grateful you're bringing this up because the one thing that I've learned is that we're not paying enough attention
Hmm.
and we're not giving them the sort of the grace and the validation and the empathy because we're so focused on mom. And I don't think it's necessarily our fault as a community or as a culture because the men also want to present themselves as I'm just so capable and it's so hard for them to be vulnerable and to share. But they are in such a hard position. They are in such a hard position. Um, my husband used to describe it, and he still to this very day says, wherever I was, I felt guilty that I wasn't somewhere else.
Mm.
If I was, and we're going back to I was on bed rest. So if I was in the hospital with mom, I felt guilty I wasn't home taking the kids. If I was taking care of the kids, I felt, oh my God, I have to be at work because who's going to pay the bills? If I was at work, why am I not in the NICU? If I'm in the NICU, why am I not at home helping Toby with the kids? So that's the first thing I remember of him constantly saying, him expressing the guilt part of and ultimately coming from that heavy responsibility that most men feel. I am responsible for everyone and everything in this family.
Mhm.
And when that's on an average day. So imagine how much more so when there is this complicated crisis and when you have a mother who's falling apart and you have a baby that's in the NICU and they can't just fix it. They can't go into that fix it mode that most men like. So I feel like we're not giving them enough credit or attention or validation. And it became huge for us in WeeCare. We do a tremendous amount of week peer-to-peer support, huge amount of peer-to-peer support. They don't do so good in the group setting because they're busy rescuing their family. So a lot of peer-to-peer support. And at least once a year, we get a rabbi or a clinician to come and speak to the men. We have a Zoom workshop where they give them a ton of validation, acknowledgement, recognition, tips, tools about how to deal with their pain and how to deal with their marriage and how to deal with their situation. So first and foremost, if any men are listening, I feel for you. So
Mhm.
that's really
Mhm.
what I wanted to share because it's just a woman, it's much easier for them to talk to a friend. A
Sure.
woman, it's much easier. They have a mother, they have a mentor. It's very, very hard for a man, and especially the juggle is so, so huge.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece, just to validate that and recognize that. And we appreciate that at WeCare. And then you have, it's so individual though. So it's hard to generalize. I could tell you my experience, but I think it's hard to generalize because I hear everyone has different circumstances and everyone has different relationships and everyone has different dynamics and everyone is
Hmm.
coming into this crisis at a different time in their marriage. So
Right.
I was fortunate that I was, again, 40 years old when this happened. So we had already been through a tremendous amount of stuff and we had already worked through a lot of stuff. So for better or for worse, we had a little bit of a blueprint of where he works best, where I work best, what I need when I'm saying we weren't perfect about it. We were plenty messy. But imagine like a couple that's younger. Then you have couples who are struggling in general, right? And then a crisis hits, right? There's nothing like a crisis or a family wedding. We could call that a
Hmm.
crisis too.
Hmm.
That you see the flaws of your marriage that help represent the
Sure.
flaws of your marriage and the beauty of your marriage, right? Very, very hard to focus on the beautiful parts of the marriage when you're in crisis and you're in pain. So I'll hear from a lot of the women. My husband's great, but he doesn't get me. My husband just doesn't want to listen. He just wants to fix, or my husband's avoiding me. So it's very hard to generalize here. I
Hmm.
like to tell everybody that um, there's no right or wrong way to handle a crisis. There's your way. But it's very hard if the marriage was strained prior, or if a husband. We had a wild story. I'll tell you a wild story. We had a get together for the We Cure Moms in Lakewood last year, and I had a panel of moms talking about their experiences. And that was one of the questions that I asked: how is your marriage or your relationship affected by this crisis? So this woman gets up, one of my panelists, and with her beautiful smile, she says, "We just grew together. And we got so strong." She really did. I happen to know. We got so strong. She had had a loss. There was multiples. She had a loss. And we just connected and we worked every morning. We got up and we studied a page out of some religious book on faith and we did a reading together and we just became a team because we needed to become a team. And I'm just like, I have four people pinching me under the table. It's beautiful. And I think it was important for people to hear because for those who have it, it's important to appreciate it and not take it for granted. It's a gift.
Sure.
It's a gift. And when you're feeling like down in the morning and you have to wake up and how am I going to face the day? That's something that gratitude of like, okay, thank God I'm a team with my husband and we're not at war. Like, just be grateful. But for all those women who don't have it, we had a woman who was sitting in the audience. I was fully aware of this. And this is why I'm saying the story that they were newly married. This was their first. It was a good month into this, and her husband hadn't yet gone to the NICU to see the baby.
Oh my.
He
Oh
just
my.
couldn't. He just couldn't. He just couldn't. He just couldn't. He didn't have the ability. I mean, that's an extreme story, but
Yeah.
this, the ability to see that child, he couldn't get himself. And this woman was juggling, trying to empower her husband, trying to accept her husband, trying to help him. She was like so codependent to what he was going through, not even dealing with her stuff, then dealing with her baby who was dying. It was so huge. And
Poor
so
thing.
thank God the next panelist got up and said, "I am so happy you had that experience because I did not have that."
Hmm.
She says, "I'm still resentful for how my husband just checked out emotionally. It was too much for him. He couldn't handle it. He gets very anxious about anything medical. He showed up in ways that he kept on providing for the family, and he drove me back and forth to the hospital, but he couldn't handle any decisions or anything like that. And he just kept me up at night with his fears,
Wow.
you know. So does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
It does. It does. And it really like shows you the, kind of the diversity of the experience. I also acknowledge that like even if you had a wonderful, healthy relationship before, I think the reality is that is, especially if there's other children at home, you're so strapped in terms of where your needs are going to, where do you have enough energy to put all the attention. And so that baby takes a lot of time and attention and the other children at home and work related responsibilities and financial. And I imagine that the relationship becomes very low on the level, like very low of
Yeah,
priority. And so even if everything was good, there's no time to like, let's go out and have coffee together, or let's go sit on the couch and schmooze, or let's take a walk together. There may actually be no practical ability to do that for much of the time where you're dealing with a fragile baby in a hospital. And so just the acknowledgement that even when things are good in the
it's tough.
relationship,
It's tough.
it's
So
difficult to nourish the relationship,
and
right?
we had a social worker on to talk about this, and she was pushing them, and I think you had mentioned it when you came on to speak to WeeCare, that some, like, let's say you were talking about intimacy, and being together physically. So you'll have a classic example, like what you shared is there's this feeling of guilt, like, oh my God, how can I have pleasure and be enjoying myself when I have a baby who's sick in the NICU? Or there's
Hmm.
this total avoidance. I can't even imagine going there. And you sort of was giving permission, like it's okay. It's okay to feel and want. And so what this social worker, another woman had gotten come on, and she was so amazing. She says, use this as an opportunity to connect. Don't feel guilty. And again, what we spoke about before about nurture yourself so you can nurture your child. If your concern is about the child and you want, when you're, and we've heard this from many mothers, and it was just actually very, very helpful. When you're going to visit the baby in the hospital, look at that as a little date, and spend some
Hmm.
time together and go to
Husband and wife. Hmm.
Starbucks. And so it's about perspective and pick up a
Sure.
cup of coffee and get dressed and put on a nice scarf, if you can, if you're up to it,
Hmm.
and look at it as a night out and maybe make some time in the car that we're going to talk about, not about the baby, but we'll talk about something else. And, there's ways of sort of giving yourself that permission if you're up to there to wiggle that into. But I do think there ends up being some collateral damage, like with any crisis. And I think for me, again, like I mentioned, my husband's positive. He's very strong, but I felt terribly sorry for him that he was just carrying so much. I
Mm.
just felt so, so bad for him that he was just carrying so, so much. And I think the way it manifested with him is once the baby was home, he like checked out. He just couldn't. He just checked out. Like he's
Mm,
like, I did my part, now it's yours. And that
mm.
was fine. I was cool with that, you know. But so when it came to therapies and it came to doctor's appointments and this and that, I was completely in charge because I sort of understood that he was depleted, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever think about like, would you ever have a conversation about how to replenish the depletion? Like, what do you need to recover? And that might be a good place to for us to discuss it of like, what does recovery actually look like? What does the trajectory once that baby is home? Now you're talking about becoming that super mom. You just said I took on all the responsibilities because my husband wasn't able to, and I understood it and I had compassion toward him. But at the end of the day, all of it was yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I think self-care is just so important. Always, always.
Hmm.
I think I'm so glad that it's become acceptable.
Hmm.
The whole self-care is not selfish. And I think it's not even about, oh, let me treat myself to some self-care because I went through a crisis, but more about a mother needs it constantly as maintenance, you know? And I think I was pretty good with that, especially what was going on in my brain with the OCD and the anxiety.
Right, right,
But again,
right.
because this isn't my first rodeo, I recognize that, you know, that I
Yeah.
needed that. And I think a lot of the mothers feel like, you know, guilt that they weren't attaching or bonding to this baby in the NICU. So now we have to do 24/7 bonding with this baby to heal this baby, and then we have to go into therapy. That no, 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 no. You know, God's going to take care of everybody. God's going to heal everybody. It's all going to work itself out or not. But you can't lose yourself in that process. You have to
Hmm.
heal from what you've lost, and you'll have to stay nourished so that you can maintain the energy that you need. And one of the, you know, we have self-care, I think, is emotional, physical, spiritual. And one of the
Right.
things we care is that we have so much peer-to-peer support. I think that's huge. And I was missing a lot of that back then because it didn't exist. And I think there's so much conversation and dialogue about just encouraging women to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, that whole martyr syndrome, it's just an old-fashioned concept. We just have to do away with it, you know, the way that my mother raised me. And I just knowing that we're not angels, we are physical beings. So
Yeah.
we run out and we exhaust ourselves, we will break down. It's just a
Hmm.
reality. And if you want to remain present and active mother, you need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself. So thank God I was able to afford a baby nurse. That was my best self-care.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I held on to her for as long as I needed to. And, you know, thank God financially I was able to. Many people can't. But I would encourage people to, if they're looking where to spend their money,
Hmm.
or if
Hmm.
they want to ask their friends or family to help out, like that. Some people don't want it. They don't want someone else in the house. They don't, you know, again, only within your comfort zone. So that for me was, and again, there was a tiny little guilty voice in the back saying, why a nurse again? He just had a nurses in the NICU, but then shh, away, you know?
I
Um,
think, but what I also am hearing you describe is, I think so often self-care really is a misnomer, and you described it that there's so many aspects of self-care. Self-care is not really, I want to be very clear. I don't think it's about manicures and pedicures. I really do think it's about a big chunk of it is about relationship building and a relationship management, meaning I know that when I spend time with a good friend, I feel stronger, right?
sure.
And so can I step away, have a babysitter so that I can step away and go out for a meal or a coffee with a friend so that I can come back strengthened and more. I have more capacity. Sometimes it's fresh air, right? Sometimes it's taking a walk. Sometimes it's vacation. Sometimes it is actually stepping away from reality. But like, what can I do? I actually think also self care sometimes is in the form of cleaning help, right? That in terms of making sure if I
Oh,
don't
it's
have to clean the house,
mandatory. It's not even, I
right?
don't even call it self-care.
Right.
It's
Right.
mandatory. Mandatory.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying with the martyr thing. And I like, and so, you know, the nurse, I allowed myself to go out with my husband at night. And I
Right.
even allowed myself, believe it or not, a day or two vacation. Okay, I left my older daughter at home because
Right.
I knew the power of that and I knew the restorative power of that. And I knew the, like I said, the word maintenance power of that, the necessity of it to keep up with the day to day to day to day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just there's a lot of guilt I felt with, okay, now the baby's home, now we're back to normal. So let me make the most amazing Purim party, like back to the kids, and let me make the most amazing Pesach Seder, and let me make the most amazing because now everything's back to normal. So again, that took a while for me to like, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
what I mentioned before is I'm constantly talking about the need of getting yourself someone good to talk to, a professional licensed clinician, which, a therapist, which happened with me when my husband said, Toby, you're just not okay.
Yeah.
We didn't go into that, was worth just getting uh, just a person to listen to. And I remember her sitting there and just saying, and again, you would think that I know this, but what? What? I can't. Toby, do you hear what you just went through? Do
Right.
you hear yourself what you just went through? And me just like crying. No, I don't know. And I just listening,
Right.
just
Right.
getting that validation, the empathy, and her teaching me some CBT skills of what to do with these intrusive thoughts. There was
Hmm.
a year that I went into medication. I have no problem saying that, just to help me get to, again, quiet that constant anxiety and chatter in my brain. And again, whether it's a mentor, a rabbi, a therapist, just give yourself that place of where someone could hear you and just, because you're not necessarily back to the relationships. If you're not getting it from spouse, again, we have to accept the things we cannot change the things we can. So if you're not getting it from spouse and you're not getting it from mom and you're not getting it from dad, so you're going to sit here and be either miserable, resentful, and then also just try to manage until you break apart. Either you pay someone to be there for you in
Hmm.
form of therapy, or you open yourself up to a good friend, or you find a peer that gets it. Because again, we're not angels. We need this. We need
Yeah.
the support so much.
And I think that like the acknowledgement that, the spouse can't always be there, that person for you the amount that you need them to be. And sometimes I think it's critical that the spouse can move back into spousal role versus like, I am the everything supportive, completely, the person who you have to depend on. It's an exhausting space for any spouse to be in. So I think I like the idea of outsourcing a little bit in terms of knowing like I have a responsibility to take care of myself. I'm going to bring somebody in who's an expert and expertise I can lean into and onto so that my relationships with my spouse, my mother, my father, my other kids will be stronger because of it, because I will have like kind of picked myself up with the support of a professional. I mean, I think we've really covered quite a bit, which I'm so grateful for. I just want to comment back on you used a comment, you said like the what the heck just happened moment, where you just like that moment of awareness of like it's that kind of coming up above the water for the first time. What do you remember of that, and what do you want people to know about that?
It didn't occur to me. I didn't allow myself to even like think about that until I started going to therapy actually, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I was just in, so it was just a geographical like change with the baby. So I went from worrying about him in the NICU to like now worrying about him at home. And then just sitting in therapy and just, her, the therapist, just because I was like, okay, what's going to be? I need to talk about what's going to be. She's like, shh, let's talk about what happened, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then it's like the enormity of it. And I remember the first time that I left session, I just cried for hours and hours and hours. And I called my husband. I'm like, do you have any idea what we've been through? As if he didn't.
Right.
He was
He's like, welcome back to reality.
like, no, no, I was
Mhm.
sleeping the whole time.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Can I say something? Do you think that how long do you think it took for you to feel, 3 months later he comes home from the hospital, several weeks or months later you have an awareness that like Toby's not okay. How long do you feel like it took you to finally not feel like you were in that trauma space anymore?
You want to know something? It's still there.
Tell me more.
I think it's been a gift in a way because it's pushed me to work as hard as I do for WeeCare and to
Hmm.
really connect to the moms and to talk to them. And because I will never forget, you know, you mentioned before something about being individuals. I've had friends who had micropremies and just seemingly sailed through it because everyone's personality, versus nature versus nurture, whatever it is. I'm a deeply, deeply feeling person, a very, very sensitive person. And one of the gifts of being such a sensitive, I can tell you the downside, but one of the gifts of being a sensitive person is that I want to take my experiences that I went through and now I could like connect to people going through them as well. It's still rough for me. I just recently took my son to a he's 11 years old, took him to a psychiatrist because we're thinking of medicating him for something. And we start again from the beginning of the story. And I'm still crying when I'm saying the story. I'm
Sure.
not falling apart. I'm not falling apart. I'm not losing it. But it's still hard for me to share his story. It's hard for me to talk about how much he suffered. It's hard for me to talk about what pain he went through. It's hard for me to talk about what he's still going through and what challenges he still has,
Hmm.
you know? And uh, um, but because I'm in a healthier space now, we got back into the car. It was in the five towns. I live in Lakewood. And my husband says, "Do you want to talk about it?" And then he looks at me and goes, "Oh no, I know you don't want to talk about it." I said, "No, because if I talk, I
Mm.
start." And I came home and I tucked myself into bed because now I know about self-care. And I texted my husband. I'm like, "I am not being mommy tonight. I just had a hard day. This
Hmm.
the I wouldn't even label it as PTSD. It's just hard to talk about sometimes.
Sure.
Um, I definitely I'm not crazy anymore. I'm not obsessing. I'm not anxious. It's much easier for me to be normal.
I'm going to challenge you on that word of
Yeah, yeah,
crazy versus
yeah, yeah.
normal. Right. You when
Yeah,
a person's and you
I
know
just,
this and
I
you know
know.
this, but I'm going to call it out because it's on a podcast because
It's important.
if you and I were just like hanging out together, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, crazy normal. But we're hanging out in front of a lot of people, and I want people to understand that what you experienced post birth and postpartum was so understandable as a reaction to the trauma that you lived through. And
Yeah,
that's, I think, the most important message is like, if you experience this like overwhelm, this exhaustion, this obsessive thoughts and anxiety that's causing you to crawl the walls, like it may be understandable, but it's a reaction. It's an aftermath of a traumatic exposure.
right.
And as you just said, 11 years later, while you're not reliving the trauma, right? Even though you told the story, you weren't in your body, you weren't out of your body, you weren't like dissociative. I told a really hard story. And I'm going to introduce a word here that you haven't used, which is there's so much grief over
Sure,
what you lived through.
sure.
And grief for your lived experience and grief for your son's current and future and past. Like the grief is there. And I want us to say, like, that's not crazy, right? It's not normal, but it's common,
And it's
right?
understandable. It's
And it's
understandable.
understandable. And
Yeah.
could we meet it with so much more compassion, right? And the
And
same compassion that you use for everybody else, like
yeah,
using that
and
words
like I
internally.
said, that was the change. The change
Mm-hmm.
was to allow myself to tuck myself into bed, make myself, I told my husband to bring me up some coffee and some chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And said, "You're doing bedtime tonight, and I'm not talking to anyone tonight." And just and to do it without shame or guilt, but just like,
Yeah.
I've been through a lot. I went through something. This was a reminder of it, and I'm allowed to have a moment for myself.
Yeah.
And then the next day to be just totally fine and grateful I'm moving forward and processing the appointment and seeing what has to be done. So I
Yeah.
think in that sense I got stronger, but I don't think I ever want to let go of it, and because I want to be able to be there for those that are going through it in a way that really is authentic.
Yeah. Well, I
It's
mean, it's
really
changed you. It's changed you. And this is what we consider that terminology of post-traumatic growth, right?
yeah,
Changed you. I think, again, clarifying that you can have a traumatic event that you continue to relive again and again, but you could also have a traumatic event that stays in the past that you remember. And that when you go to a doctor's appointment and you have to tell the story again, you can be you kind of telling it as a form of a story that this happened to me 10, 11 or less years ago, but it's not like I'm actively in my experience of 10 and 11 years ago. And that's how trauma shifts and changes over time.
Mhm.
Um,
Also didn't have the struggle that many women, and I want to acknowledge that it is that a lot of women have to make a decision if they're going to have another pregnancy past this. And we,
yes.
we see it happening by week here very often. And we've had discussions and conversations about it. And of course, everyone shouldn't rush into anything. Everyone should take their time. Everyone has to make sure that both parties are ready. I spoke to a mother who said she was ready like 2 years after the preemie, but her husband wasn't.
Right.
Husband wasn't, and she was very understanding and she was very
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah.
And then there are moms who can't do this, just say, "I can't do this again. It's too much of a risk." So talk about PTSD. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so strong and powerful and real that a woman described to me that literally she had given birth in the 25th week. So in her subsequent pregnancy, at 25 weeks, she started laboring.
Mm.
She runs to the hospital and her doctor, this is great that doctors are aware of this now. and he's like flipping through her files. Okay, I can't believe I just said that. He's flipping through her files, and he's like, your body's having a somatic response, a
Oof.
trauma response, because 3, 4 years ago you went through this. Could you imagine?
Wow, that's
Laura,
wild.
you
That
love
is
this stuff,
so
right?
wild.
You love this stuff.
So wild. So wild.
And after
Yeah.
24 hours, it quieted down, and she moved on to have a
That she moved on to therapy. She was
not
like,
for a
oh, gotta
full-term
get care.
birth. She a
Right,
full-term birth,
right.
which is the
Full
best
term.
for
Right.
her was the best for her was the best therapy. It's not for
Yeah,
everybody.
for sure. For sure.
So we're talking about PTSD. That so when you're talking about post-traumatic growth, what's beautiful is, and what we talk to our women about is, you're coming in prepared. You're
Hmm.
educated. You know what went wrong last time. Not in terms of there's no way of determining if or not you're having that preemie baby. Medicine isn't that sophisticated yet, or else we wouldn't have WeeCare, right? But you know what went right or wrong as far as your self-care, as far as your relationship, as far as your support at
Mm,
home, as far as everything else. You now have this arsenal of knowledge.
mm.
So change the things that you can, and let's reframe, make this into a great birth,
Beautiful.
a great
Yeah. Yeah.
experience. And instead of saying, "Oh, my mother-in-law wasn't there for me," say, "Okay, my mother-in-law wasn't there for me, but who can? Who
Right.
can this
Right.
time
And I
around?"
think that's also partly like that's part of also the planning towards if there is a future birth. That arsenal is actually part of what's going to be a part of your care plan.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing I just want to say that we'll end with this, I want it to be very I think it's so critical that both voices are contributing to the discussion of whether to get pregnant again.
Yes.
Even if it's not in the husband's body and the woman is going, but I can do it, but I'll manage it. The husbands, as you so perfectly described, are deeply impacted by it as well. And so listening to his voice, listening to her voice, and really
And vice
acknowledging the
versa.
impact. Yes, for
Vice
sure.
versa. If he's pressuring you and you're not ready,
Right. Right. And I think just really honoring that voice of I'm not okay, or I want to be okay, or this is what it would mean for me to be okay enough to potentially walk back into that space of attempting another pregnancy. But being really clear that in these moments when there is this trauma history and this medical history, it's got to be more than just like a feeling. It has to be like, have we assessed the different parts of our function and how are we doing as a family, as a couple? How's my body? How's our
how's the
relationship?
preemie doing? How's the
How's the
baby
preemie
doing?
doing? Exactly.
How much attention
Exactly.
do we need to pay on him? How much will
Yeah.
this thing work from the attention we're giving
Right.
him? And if we're
Right.
making this choice, are we ready for that?
So
Yeah.
much, so much to consider. So much to consider. Toby, this was a treat. We will see each other again soon, I do hope. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, but most importantly, your vulnerability, your willingness to share your personal story. That's everything. Because, when somebody sees somebody like you and you describe the I'm not okayness of it, it says, oh, you can be like all put together and accomplished, and you can get well again and accomplish amazing things. And you can, and you do need to get proper help. And when you
Absolutely.
do, the outcomes are positive. So I hope your little one, who is not so little anymore, continues to grow and strong and healthy.
Thank
And
you.
thank you and you should always just have the strength to continue doing good things.
My pleasure. Thank you, Deborah.